welcome to a special edition of African Hour 2022. My name is Fru Nde Nkimbeng, the producer and host. My co-host and technical advisor is Francis Awokang. Our special guest for today's discussion on the crisis in Ambazonia are Mr. Clifford Krieger and our own Ambazonia son, Dr. Bill Nde. I'd like to, first of all, welcome our audience that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to kick the 2022 year with a wonderful discussion about Ambazonia. Let me introduce our special guest. Mr. Clifford Krieger is a graduate from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He holds a master's degree from the University of Southern California. He served for 30 years as a flight pilot, mostly in Europe and Asia. Mr. Clifford served in staff officer position in the Philippines, Naples, Italy, and Washington, D.C. He served as chief of the Joint Staff Strategy Division as an instructor at the National War College. After retiring from the Air Force, he worked as a system analyst. He ran twice for a state representative from Lowell, and currently serves the Lowell License Commission Board. Welcome, Mr. Krieger.
Thank you.
Then our second guest, Dr. Bill Nde, is a Southern Cameroonian American educated at Government Bilingual High School, Bamenda, and the University of Yaoundé. And in Nigeria, Amalu Bello University, Institute of Sorbonne, Paris, Free and Clergy Pontoise, where he obtained his doctorate degree in languages, literature, and contemporary civilizations. He is a poet, playwright, storyteller, critic, translator, and fellow at the Booker T. Washington Leadership. He has held teaching positions at the Paris School of Languages, the University of Sunshine Coast at Spiny Downs, the University of Queensland, Brisbane, St. Lucia and Deakin's University, Melbourne, Australia. He is presently Tenor University Professor of Modern Languages, Communication, and Philosophy at Tuskegee University. He has an extensive publishing record of accomplishment with over 58 works in 299 publications. Welcome, Dr. Nde.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction.
Mr. Krieger, the Ambazonian people appreciate your enormous contribution and commitment to call the world's attention to the atrocity of French Cameroon in Ambazonia on your City Life show, weekly City Life show. Since 2017, you have educated yourself and then educated your audience and viewers about Ambazonia. Today, most Lowellians know where Ambazonia is and about the Ambazonian Liberation War than most Africans in the diaspora. The war in the Cameroon is a forgotten human tragedy, completely and intentionally ignored by the international media. Ambazonians in the diaspora are not putting in the effort to inform the world of the genocide in our homeland. January 5th, 2022 marks the 5th anniversary of the abduction of our leaders by Cameroon security forces in Nigeria. You met our interim president, Mr. Sisiko Ayuk Tabe, at Lowell City Hall in 2017. They and thousands of innocent civilians are serving life sentences in prison in French Cameroon. We must not forget their sacrifices. Many Ambazonian factions in the struggle for liberation fight amongst themselves and present a weak front against the enemy, French Cameroon. If you were speaking to them, what advice would you tell them?
I'm not sure I'm the proper person to advise, but I think that it's important that the story get out. I looked at there's an organization in Philadelphia that publishes foreign policy, and they listed the 10 top areas for 2020, problem areas overseas. And in Africa, they mentioned Ethiopia. They mentioned, without using the name Boko Haram, they mentioned the Boko Haram problem in the Sahel, is that right?
In Nigeria, Nigeria, northern Cameroon.
North. But they didn't mention Cameroon. And I think that that's because we have to overcome reluctance of people to talk about this by providing information. I'd compare it to the Uyghurs in China. We have that tension. We know that the Uyghurs are being suppressed, what, 1 million of them in Western China? And yet there's a lot of reluctance to talk about the issue. And China, of course, slaps out at people that do bring it up. And I think that we're running into the same problem with regard to Anglophone Cameroon, Ambazonia. We have to do a better job collectively of making the point that this problem is going on. And granted, it's a problem that's competing with a lot of other problems in the world, but at this point, we have to make information available. We have to conduct propaganda. The other way of doing it is by escalating the war, and I'm not sure if we can fix things in other ways. I'm not sure escalating the war with more dead, more wounded, more suffering is necessarily the way to go. That's just my private opinion.
Dr. Nde, do you have anything to add on that, please?
Well, let me start by thanking Mr. Clifford raising a very critical point, which has always been my take on the downside of our revolution, of our struggle, which is the ability for us to get our message out. I know we are a community or a people, not a reading public, and not a people, like somebody said it somewhere, I don't want to misquote, talking about if you want to hide something from a Black man, put it in a book, right? So we need information about our struggle out. We need to make people aware of what is happening. Let us remember, there is this great African proverb that says, if the lions don't tell their tale, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. What does it mean? Something so simple. Think about it. Humans who go to hunt, they have the ability to speak. but lions don't speak if the lions don't come out. So we have to toot our own horns. We have to talk about what is happening. We have to talk about the institutional harassments, suffering, pain that we have undergone in the hands of neighboring La République for 61 years. We have to make that known, and making it known not only by writing it, but by going out, talking about it, addressing the kinds of people who would listen to us and who can proffer help. There is no point spending time talking about our revolutions, our revolution amongst ourselves. When we talk about the revolution amongst ourselves, who are we winning? We need to win people on our side. Let's not forget, the more we are, the stronger we are. It is just common knowledge. Besides, maybe the fact that our message goes out in bits and pieces from divided factions, nobody seems to pay attention to us. Why don't we have a concerted, a united front, united in purpose? I'm not saying people cannot disagree in their approaches to attaining a specific goal, but if you are part of a team, hold your position, play your part in the game very well. If there is a win, it is a win for everybody. There is a loss, it is a loss for everybody. So I think we need a united front, and I would applaud Mr. Nkimbeng, your endeavor for promoting or for having this forum where we can talk about these issues and letting it out there to, first of all, your Lowellian community, and certainly it gets out to the bigger community. This is exactly what needs to be done. And if I have any advice, I know the revolution concerns everybody, but a revolution that is missing the intellectual arm of the revolution leaves me with a lot of questions. Because if you're asking who are the intellectuals of our revolution, rally them to get the message out, to write op-eds. I know I've spent time writing academic papers, writing books, right? But the academic papers remain in the ivory towers for those who are interested, but not to the general public. But if we engage these intellectuals to write op-eds that will appear in New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, then you would see people begin to talk about it. Wait a minute, why are these people punished in the Cameroons just because they are English speaking? Tongues will begin to work. And I think Mr. Krieger mentioned something very, very key, which has to do with ignorance. And that ignorance, I think it is consciously cultivated, where people don't want to talk about certain things and people just ignore it. It is much more convenient to ignore things that are hurtful than to remember them. And it is a conscious effort which the revolutionaries in us should be very mindful of. That conscious cultivation of ignorance by the broader society, we have to break the cycle by conscientizing, by making it possible that the world comes to grip with the dirty practices that have left us subjugated. I'll pause right there.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to add that Mr. Krieger, even though he is not Cameroonian, he is not African, but as I have mentioned, he talks about the Ambazonian issue on his weekly show every week. And I wonder, Ambazonians and Africans who are watching this show should be asking, why is he so concerned about our plight and our pain?
I have to say, I'm 2%, but on the other side of Nigeria, so. I wanted to follow up on something. For the American Revolution, I think the writings of Paine were very important. And the old age has gotten to me, so I forgot Paine's first name.
Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine, that's right.
Yeah.
So he was a propagandist, and he put out the word. And I think that that's very, very important. But the other thing I think is making associations with politicians to get the story out. Today, front page of our local newspaper, the Lowell Sun, is an article that Senator Ed Kennedy is sponsoring legislation to support free and fair elections in Cambodia. Han Sung, the current leader of Cambodia, I would say the dictator, does not hold free and fair elections. But this is being spotlighted. The state senator, yeah, he's only a state senator, but he is making headlines. Other people will pick up that newspaper article and they'll talk about it. It'll go out to Long Beach, California, the other big Cambodian city in the United States. I graduated from high school in Long Beach, so I have a tie out there. So I think that building relationships with politicians is also very important.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. That reminds me, 2 weeks ago, you wrote an article about Ambazonia to the editor of the Lowell Sun.
Yes.
And I totally agree with you that speaking, quoting the words of our Speaker of the House, the Honorable Tip O'Neill, he said, all politics is local. So, and I would encourage all Ambazonians, wherever they are, to be involved in local politics. Because if you want someone, a politician, to help you, you must also be willing to give something to that politician. And it's like what we say in Cameroon, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. And it will start by visiting your city hall, know who your counselor is, talk to your pastor, talk to your student about the crisis in Ambazonia, and you never know where help can come from. So going forward, I like to bring this point for discussion. Some Western countries are pushing for talks and negotiation with French Cameroon now. Ambazonian liberation forces are scoring major victories and inflicting casualties on the enemy in ground zero. Do you think now is the right time for talks and negotiations? What are your thoughts?
I'd like to quote the famous Anglophone politician Winston Churchill, who said, "Jaw, jaw is better than war, war." So if we can make progress with talks, I think that that's important. And I think talks are strengthened by the strength of the resistance force, the Ambazonian Army Resistance Force. So if talks will work, then I think that they should be supported if there's that hope. But in the end, of course, the Francophones need to understand that the failure of the talks will represent a failure for them. My thought.
All right, can I just come in there briefly?
Yes, Dr. Nde, you have the word.
Thanks, Mr. Krieger, for that idea. For me, I would rather suggest dialogue is always good. Interestingly enough, I'm a student or a scholar of peace studies or peace and conflict resolutions. Dialogue is good and very good when you have two willing parties to dialogue, and always good when we have the dialogue, the conditions for the dialogue set and agreed upon by the dialoguing parties. Now, at this point, if we are to dialogue, we would be wanting first that the conditions for the dialogue be agreed upon, and that the parties be willing to dialogue, and that no party gets into such a dialogue with their hands tied behind or even tied at all. Now, we seem to have gained a lot of grounds to the point where we are at the point of no return. Something, just a word or two might have resolved 4 or 5 years ago, has now gotten to the point where the round table can no longer and should not. I don't expect anybody to think that if there were to be a dialogue, it should take place within the confines of the geographic specification of the Cameroons, neither in Ambazonia nor in La République du Cameroon. Not in Nigeria neither, because of late, we know the complicity of the Nigerian government in handing over the interim, the leaders of the interim government who were just whisked from Nigerian Naira Hotel back to Cameroon. Dialogue will move things forward, but not just dialogue at all costs, dialogue with genuine representation. Yes, dialogue with a unified structure that is representing all the factions, all the conflicting factions. Because while we are conflicting, while we are in this struggle, some people believe, well, our way is the best. Your way is the best. Yes, but think about it. If it is best, are we all in it together? What common strategy do we have to win? So let's think about the dialogue. And I would say one thing. Mr. Krieger mentioned the idea of propaganda. I would rather say not propaganda, but speak truth to power. Because if you don't speak truth to power, what happens is, people are always dismissive of what we call propaganda. They say, oh, that's propaganda. And when Mr. Krieger mentioned Tom Paine, I was nodding because that's somebody I hold very dearly to my heart. He is one of the founding fathers of the American Revolution. Less talked about. Less talked about. But what he did was to speak truth to power. And I'll tell you why campaign is less talked about. So you see, what he did was not just propaganda. At independence, campaign was the only one who stood for the fight we are still fighting in this country today for free and fair elections. He said every single American born free or enslaved must have the right to vote, because every other right in this country depends on the right to vote. So what I'm saying is, let us speak truth to power in the light of pain, and we will get this revolution not just off the ground, we will actually implant and cement and concretize our aspirations. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm really enjoying this. And what I would also say that if there are to be negotiations, we in the diaspora, the Ambazonian, must also intensify our defense forces. We need to go to negotiation with an upper hand. As Dr. G said, we have reached a point of no return. If this were 5 years ago that La République thought that they were going to use 3 weeks to crush Ambazonians, and the war is now into its 5th and 6th year. So where Ambazonia stands now, Ambazonia will speak with a louder voice and act with a hammer, because we have reached that position where we have asserted our authority. And that at the beginning of this war, that anyone did not count us. By our bootstrap, we have pulled ourselves and shown that we will want nothing less than full independence. Francis, if you can if you will have any contribution, please feel free.
And thanks to Dr. Krieger, Mr. Krieger, for the brilliant work that he does for Lowell, through Lowell, rather, and what he does for the plight of our people. And I've paid keen attention to what he was saying here about the need for us to come up with the need for us to basically find a way of exposing what is happening there on the ground. I was very, very surprised when he talked about the fact that of the list of the conflicts to watch out for in the year 2022 in Africa, according to his research, the Ambazonian struggle or the Ambazonian genocide or war of independence is not listed. And I think that should give every Ambazonian, that should really be like a wake-up call for us, that we really need to do more. That for over 4 years, they're killing our people, they've burned more than 400 villages, and it's not listed. So we really have to tighten our belts in 2022 and hope for a different outcome. And also thanks, Dr. D. I've learned a lot from what you've said here. The one thing that I'm taking away here is that the need, as you said, for us to find a way of getting our message in front of the media houses, either via press. And I'm just been sitting and writing notes and seeing how we can actualize that in this year. We should probably come up with a think tank or a strategy to raise funds and really find a way to have op-eds before the end of the year to talk about the struggle. I think that's something that we should really see how we can do. Hopefully we can reach out to you, or we can work in the background and see how we can make this happen.
On January 5th, 2018, our leaders were abducted from Nigeria, and they have been incarcerated under very terrible conditions. I've never been to prison, but I cannot imagine what they are going through. Mr. Kriegel, you met Mr. Sisiko at City Hall, and I believe your attachment, your commitment, your compassion about this struggle comes as a result that you have, I mean, you have seen these people and actually talked to some of them. And on your show, you have really called on the unconditional release of all prisoners of war. Sir, if you were to talk to the world and talk to our leaders, and particularly President Awokang, whom you met, what message would you tell them?
Well, two different audiences. I would say to the world that people need to have a chance to choose what they want in terms of government. I probably get that from my learning about American history, but also because I participated in the Cambodian battle against the Khmer Rouge. And like the rest of my fellow airmen, I failed. We did not win that war before the U.S. Congress pulled us out, and it's not been good for the Cambodians ever since. So I'd like to push the idea of freedom, but for people from Ambazonia itself and the leadership, I think that the important thing is to build alliance coalitions of different factions so that they can unite and present a solid front, a solid single story about where you want to go, what you want to do. And I think that we can build alliances too with American politicians. So I'm a Republican. I used to be the chairman of the Lowell Republican City Committee, but yet I talked to Vanna Howard, who's my state representative. We interact, we talk to each other. I give her my ideas. She doesn't take all my ideas, of course, but yet I have that opportunity to build a relationship. I know who Ed Kennedy is, our state senator. Tom Golden, I've known for quite a while. I've stopped and lobbied him in the lobby of the post office about a higher education issue I feel strongly about. So we can build these relationships, even though we are maybe of different political parties, different attitudes. So I encourage people to reach out to their political leadership who they elected or allowed to be elected, and then put forward the story of Ambazonia, put forward the suffering of the people, and try and build support, because that will well up in within the United States government and maybe eventually get us some help in from the U.S. Congress to speak up.
So if you were to send a message to the prisoners, what message would you talk to them? And I think they will be watching this discussion, and having met President Julius Awokang here in Lowell, I see that you have a physical, personal connection with him.
I would say to the political prisoners to be strong and to present the front to the people imprisoning them that they are human beings and need to be treated with dignity. I think that and thereby they set an example for other people who are not prisoners to continue the struggle.
Dr. Nde, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, I have a lot to say. I would take a step back. We talked about dialogue a minute ago. And I think if there is any dialogue or any negotiation, well, and there were to be any preconditions, then our prisoners of wars must be released before we sit on the table. However, addressing the question of the arrest and imprisonment or incarceration of President Julius Awokang, I would want, first of all, to salute all of them in prison for their courage, for their 4 years of resilience now. And we know one thing: darkness has never overcome light. Lies have never won over truth. What they believe in is the truth, is real, and it will only come to fruition. I say it will only come to fruition if they stand firm. They should not waver. They should not be intimidated. They should not be impressed about the material well-being. They should not think that they are suffering. We have examples, and I'll take from my Christian religion to share with them. Before we ever get to Nelson Mandela coming out of prison to be the president, there was somebody called Joseph, enslaved, tortured, imprisoned, turned around, became who he was supposed to be. To those in prison, remember, destiny can be delayed. Destiny cannot be stopped. The Ambazonian people are behind you because you heard their cries and took the mantle of leadership. When others would not, you risk it all. Remember, leaders are people who can sacrifice. Leaders are people who have ideals they can die for. A leader is not a coward. A leader is not somebody who 1 minute will stand up for this value. The next, they proffer or offer some money. They say, okay, I changed my position because of this. No. So to our prisoners of war, I want to say thank you. I want to say stay strong, be steadfast. Nothing is lost. They can kill our leaders, but they cannot kill our ideals. I don't want to drag it a lot longer because I remember there is a poem I wrote about killing our leaders. They cannot kill, they can kill the earthly leaders, but they cannot kill the stars, okay? But even if they kill them, they should just give us the possibility of mourning them, to freely mourn them. They shouldn't deprive us of that freedom. So I think our leaders, we are strong. We are making sure that their ideals don't die with just their detention. So let me end right there and move on so we can move on to other questions.